Hello, Will. Welcome to Say It to Your Soul, the podcast. I'm really looking forward to our conversation this afternoon. You're actually my first male guest on the podcast. So I'm really excited about that because I think you're going to perhaps have a different perspective and some different insights that maybe I haven't heard about before. And I actually think that we've had some similar experiences in what we've talked about before pressing record today, in terms of coming from that background of kind of being the shy kid and not really feeling safe to be yourself, and then actually starting to come into your power and to be able to help others to do that as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. And firstly, I feel like it's good to get a bit of context for the listeners
Mhm.
around who you are and maybe some of the key points or challenges that have really led up to this version of you that I see in front of me today.
For sure. Well, first of all, hopefully I can live up to the expectation of being the first male on the podcast.
No pressure. There's no pressure.
I've been coaching now in the fitness industry for around 7 years. I do also coach sales for a friend of mine, Bruno Bairami. His company is called HTC. And essentially, I mean, look, fitness has been a big part of my life and what I do, but I'm very big on personal development. So a little bit of background, like you said, about being the nervous, shy, awkward person was, man, I can remember back in the day when I was in high school, primary school, anything that had to do with public speaking or just like multiple eyes on me at once, I would crumble, you know. I remember I'd be sitting in the classroom and and the teacher's like, oh, well, you never know which one I'm going to choose out for the answer
Mm.
to this question. Every time I heard that, I was like, oh God, please don't be me. And there was this one time she like would call my name out, the teacher, and I could just feel the eyes and I'd start tearing up like instantly. I couldn't control it. I had
Mm.
no idea what to do with pressure. And a lot of that was because I didn't really have my father figure, like a strong father figure in my life. And I was just really uncomfortable with confrontation and really uncomfortable. I grew up mostly with a single mom, and female influence in my life. So when it came to anything that was confrontational or had to challenge me in any kind of way, I would crumble very, very easily. And that spark, there was a lot of pain that I had associated with everything that I wanted, but it was always on the other side of this fear that I had.
Mm.
Fear of talking to people, whether it was talking to that girl or having like friends that I really wanted to be friends with, saying what I really wanted to say. I always felt like there was a wall in between basically what I wanted to express and then being able to actually do it,
Mm-hmm.
and that led to my journey of self-improvement, wanting to find ways to improve myself and develop myself. And I had to go through all of those fears that I had around being that version of myself that I could actually be proud of. And that sparked my fitness journey. And it's become so much more. The way that I look at it now is that it's become multifaceted, because I look to improve every single element in my life to have great relationships, a great partner, a great career, and great health as well.
Mm. Yeah, health is our first foundation, right? I'm a big believer in that.
Mm.
Mm. So you started training, Will, at age 15, which actually is a similar age to when I started to get into the gym, and really found that it was an empowering place to start to realize that I could develop myself. And I didn't have to do it necessarily in front of other people like in the classroom, which I think gave me a bit of extra confidence. So those first few years of training, what did that do for you in terms of your confidence, and how did you even get started in the first place?
So the way that it got started, it was interesting because it never came at one period of time for me. It was kind of like a couple of reference points. Like I remember my ex at the time. So I hugged her from behind one day. Like I had my arms over her and I just looked at my arms and they were just the skinniest things that I've ever seen. And I just looked at them with utter disappointment. It was a really strong memory for me. I don't know why that really just like affected me, but I just looked at my arms and I'm like, what the hell is that? It was like I was this awkward, skinny, fat phase. I had like this little kind of belly, but really long, skinny limbs, and I was really ashamed of it. And I think
Mm.
shame, if you actually look on the frequency chart, is one of the lowest emotions that you can feel on the frequency chart. So it's a really strong and really negative place to be, is to be living in shame. And I do remember one day I was in the change rooms, like the sports change rooms in school. And I had this friend of mine who was just like, he was just like a charismatic, confident guy. He would always be good at public speaking. He was a bit eccentric and weird, but lovable. I'm sure we all know like one friend like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea, but one day in the change rooms, he took off his shirt and he just had this amazing ripped body, right? And at 15, I didn't even know what a muscle was at this point in time. And like this is my first ever experience of seeing like a rock hard six pack. It was just like super strong looking. And I was like, dude, how come you never told me that you're ripped as hell? I'm like, he's just like, oh yeah, I do like boxing and then I run. He's full into like the Rocky training and all of that. And that was like my first like sense of like inspiration for wanting to get in shape. And then there was one day I went home and I actually had to share a room with my brother because my family wasn't like the most wealthy. So I had to share a room with my brother for most of my upbringing. And he was curling these 5 kilo dumbbells when I came home one time. And I just remember watching him and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I know I should be doing this. So I picked it up and I just curled till I couldn't anymore. Like, I couldn't lift my arms. And that was the start of it. I got obsessed because exactly like you said, it was like it was almost like the easiest way to start working on myself. I didn't have to necessarily do anything crazy. I could do it from home. I had like this little dumbbell and it was like my first ever exposure to I'm actually going to improve myself. And that's really when it started. And now, fast forward over a couple of years, I will say that it developed more confidence within me,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't completely develop me to the point that I am now. I had to do other things, but it was the start. So essentially, what happened, which was quite interesting in my friend group, I started getting shamed for it. The moment that one person in the group tried to start improving themselves, they all wanted to drag you down. So
Mm.
what happened actually is I realized and I started getting word that people were kind of bagging me out. They're like, oh, Will's cocky now. Like he thinks he's too good for us because he goes to the gym. He's one of them. I started getting categorized. So many things were starting to happen was actually I started shifting friend groups which was quite interesting because when you start to elevate and you start to elevate the kind of person that you are, what you would notice is that you'll start to have energy mismatches with some people in your life, right? So they just weren't able to understand the perspective of that self-improvement with working out. To them, it was more intimidating, it was more of a threat. So it forced me to actually start just completely changing my worldview. And I would say, if anything, that's what fitness did. It started changing my worldview, that then I could start stepping into the next version of myself that would look at things differently in order to obviously start getting more results. So essentially what happened was it started with the fitness, but then I started utilizing that mentality towards my overall personal development.
Mm. Yeah. So interesting. I've had so many conversations with people that have started out in the gym and then that's like had this flow on effect where eventually it leads them into the self development kind of field. And I guess it makes a lot of sense because you are working on yourself when you go to the gym and you realize and you see like physically you're able to see what spending some time on you and not just scrolling or watching Netflix, and even though those are very valid parts of our days and we can still do those things of course and there's no shame in that, there is so much growth that we get out of going and doing those hard things. Like I was listening to a podcast I think yesterday with Robin Sharma, and he was saying how a lot of people think that doing easy things leads to an easier life, but actually doing hard things leads to an easier life because you get so much growth out of going to the gym and pushing yourself that way, or going and meeting people at a place where you didn't know anyone and these types of things. And yeah, so I think it's interesting. I also had the same experience where it was like started out basically wanting to build a booty and it was very aesthetics driven, and then started to realize how good it felt in working on myself, and then that just cascaded into like all other aspects of my life. Before we get into, because I assume we will probably get into some of these other things that you went into after health and fitness, but I'd love to hear about as you were growing up as a young male transitioning through to a young adult, what were the
Mm.
kinds of, I suppose, pressures that you felt? And I understand that this could be a vulnerable topic for you, so I'm happy for you to share as little or as much as you want. But yeah, like coming from my experience, I felt like I had to be skinny, and then it was that we had to have big butts, and then it was like big lips and all these different things. And so I'm curious to know, like, from your perspective, did you feel certain pressures as a young man growing up?
I think I placed more pressures on myself, a lot more than necessary, to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I think one of my biggest struggles was constantly wearing a mask. Like I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. So it was very interesting because even in my family dynamic as well, like not having my dad in my life very much, there was a large part of me that wanted to prove myself and get his attention. Like for example, even when I did live with him, and this is I do get emotional when I talk about it sometimes, but him and my mum never really had a great relationship, and it was quite obvious. So what he did was he kind of bottled all of us as like, oh, with my mum. So let's say me, my brother, my sister, we're all just kind of like part of that, which he didn't really want much to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's not because he didn't necessarily love us, obviously looking back, but at that point in time, it's like, well, you want your dad there, but he never wants to spend time with you. And then the only time you really see him, and he's always arguing with your mum, basically. And there was this period of time. I remember it just got really heated. Like I remember he like there was one time they were just yelling at each other, and I just heard this smash. And the next day I look and there's a hole in the wall. He like punched a hole in the wall because he was like so angry. And my brother said this one thing to my mum that I think really affected her. And he just looked at it and he's like, when are you gonna leave that pig? And it was just like a really, I think it was a really dark moment for the family. And I just remember, I'm not sure if it was the next day or a couple of days after, but my dad didn't return back to a family. Like my mum took everything and left.
Mm-hmm.
We just gone. And as a kid, you're there, you have your dad, and he's kind of absent. You want his approval, right? And everything you do, you're like trying to get his attention, but he doesn't give it to you. And then next thing you know, he's just not in your life. And that hurt. That really, really hurt. So a lot of my challenges was I felt like I had to be enough and do more and accomplish more to get that love that I wanted.
Does that look like at that time? What did you think you would need to be in order to be enough?
I felt like I needed to be better than everyone. I
Mm-hmm.
really did. Like I would always watch these people online. They ran their businesses. They were teaching people, mentoring people. They had a lot of money. They had a lot of status. Like I wanted status. I wanted to be just the best, right? And I'm not saying there's not parts of me now that still wants to do extremely well in life. If anything, I'm more motivated than ever. It just comes from a different place. Back then, it was coming from insecurity. I wanted people to recognize me. I wanted people to notice me, especially going up through school. It's like I was getting attention, but I was just really ashamed of who I was deep down. So I was getting attention because of my looks after I hit puberty, which was very new to me, but I was still
Mm-hmm.
like this nerd in this shell of a body. Like on the inside, I'm like, oh, I hope they don't figure out who I really am, you know? So I'm going around most of my later years, like trying to fit into these groups that I just like did not relate to at all. And that was tough, It was like going through this, just faking who you are was exhausting. Every single day I was like tired from not feeling comfortable at all,
Mm-hmm.
just dreading being around people. I just wanted to closet myself. I went to a music school for year 11 and 12. I just played piano during recess and lunch. In primary school, I just go to the library and read. I just didn't want to be around people because I felt like it was exhausting. I had to keep trying to be someone to fit in.
Mm.
So that was like some of my major challenges going through that period of time.
It is exhausting trying to be someone you're not. Absolutely. I feel like it takes so much energy to show up when you're not being authentic, compared to when you are, even though it feels maybe more scary at first to show up as like to take the mask off. Like you said, you had that mask on, and I can definitely relate to that as well. And also relate to like trying to go and be friends with certain people because I thought that was how I would be enough. And I guess it's interesting how, even though it's coming from different reasons, there's similarities in that kind of that process that we've gone through. So, when you started to get into the self development kind of side of things, what was it that actually helped you to start to be okay with who you were on the inside and not have to make up for that with like your
Yeah,
outside
look,
appearance?
I would say it took me a really long time to get to the point to where I could truly be like, you know what? Like this is who I am. And I'm still probably going through it a little bit, but no, I would say I'm more on the other end now. But I went for years developing myself from the point of view of insecurity. And you'll be surprised how far you can go in accomplishing goals of yours and things like this from that place of insecurity. But I just found personally, uh, I I wasn't creating anything meaningful in my life. I was bringing the wrong people in. You know, I would hang around people. I'd get friends or let's say girlfriends or whatever it is that I actually didn't resonate with because I thought, you know, I wanted to be around them. Let's say if they were like better looking or they had a certain status that I wanted to like be around or whatever it is. So I was bringing them in, but like their values weren't aligned with mine. And it was just a point I'm like, what am I doing? You know, like I don't even like some of these people, right? And that's what happens when you wear a mask. You're gonna bring in people that align with your mask, not you. It wasn't until one day at the Marriott, actually in the Gold Coast in Surfers Paradise, I ran into someone called Craig. His Instagram is Craig Anthony Author. But basically, this man changed my life, right? So I'm not sure if you understand, if you know who Bob Proctor is.
I've heard the name, but I don't, not really familiar, no.
So he kind of teaches like law of attraction and all of this, but from a scientific point of view, actually really understanding how it works, how the world works, to be able to create the life that you want and really be able to bring those things in. And Craig actually toured some of the world with him and made some of his events. Basically, like has gone through his whole life really understanding these principles and concepts. And when I first ran into Craig, it was just at the Marriott, didn't think much of it. We kept in touch. But then over time, he invited me to Glow Church in Rabina. And I hadn't been to like a church in ages, right? And I was like, you know what? Let's just go. Why not? I'll catch up with Craig and all of this. The most interesting thing happened. I walked in. It was a Sunday morning. You know, I was kind of a little bit late. So by the time I walk in, they already started and everyone's like standing up, with their hands on their chest, and like the preacher's preaching. And I just walk in and I'm like, oh, like, all right, let me just find my place here. And I just stand there and there's just like this aura in the room. It's hard to explain, but it was just this feeling. I'm like, oh, this is like just like a safe place, you know? And as he was talking, I just felt like there was no words. I just felt tension coming up all through my neck, my throat, my face. Just burst out crying, like for no reason. Like I just walked in and just like all this stuff I was holding on to, it was just getting brought up and pushed out of me. And literally everyone came to me and held me and like put their hand on my chest, like people I never even knew, right? Just allowing me to go through it. And that was like my first ever experience of like, hey, it's okay to show, you know, who you are and like express and be vulnerable. Because I was scared of being vulnerable. And that was like the doorway. And it started with Craig because he had put me in these situations where I had the opportunity to be vulnerable and actually get proof that people would love me for it. If anything, love me more for it. And he's been an example to me in my life of someone who will give you unconditional love, like no matter what. And no matter what I've shown to him, he's always just been like, it's all good, man. I love you for who you are. And I'm just like, holy shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm like it's just this, it gives you this sense of reassurance. Like, you know what it does? It validates you, right? Because you go your whole life like wanting approval but you put the mask up and everyone's approving your mask, but you never had it. You were too scared to show the real you. So you never had the opportunity to even get that sense of validation with who you really are. And when I first had that reference, I just realized, I'm like, there's people out there who actually love me for who I am. And that's really where I started shifting. Yeah, really just being able to give myself permission to show who I really am.
Mm-hmm. Was there something in, like, was there things that they were doing that you thought, oh, normally I would never do that in front of other people and they're all doing it, so suddenly you just felt like you could be yourself? Was there something that you saw or heard, or was it literally just like a feeling that came up for you?
It was more of a feeling. And Craig and his crew, like at the end of the day, you'll bring people in who have similar values to you. And I know the kind of man that Craig is, as an example, extremely genuine and just wants the best. And he has people around that as well. And that was the group that I was going to meet in that room. So I already had a sense of like, I'm in a safe, like I logically had a bit of sense that it's okay. But I just had to go through my own discomfort of showing it. And to be honest with you, I had so much built up within me. I, I, I could barely stop it.
Mm,
It just wanted to come out. I held on to so much in my life, so much pain from my upbringing, from just that feeling of social isolation. And it's not necessarily that I know there's a lot of people who've gone through worse than I have, but at the end of the day, I still had gone through a lot in my own head and created a lot of
mm,
problems in my own head that I just stuffed down for the longest time.
mm.
So
Yeah, I guess it's like, even though, yeah, there are some things that you would think are kind of objectively worse than others, it's not really like that, because the experience that you have in your mind can be so different to anyone else. And what actually is happening versus what you feel like is happening also can be so different, because as humans, we have that ability to actually think about something that's not even happened yet. Like, you're going to speak on a stage and you could start to feel nervous and you're not even on the stage. So, yeah, I suppose even if the experiences are different, you can still have such a emotional reaction. And I think I had a similar experience when I was this in the Gold Coast that you went to that church?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I went to a full moon circle, something like this, and
Mm.
I was very non-spiritual a couple years ago. I thought it was like weird, to be honest. Like, straight up, I thought it was weird. I also thought, yeah, talking about the universe and things like this was just strange, and that if you mention that word, you'd be kind of put into a group and people in the science world wouldn't take you seriously. And then as I've gone
Yeah.
through and changed the people that I'm around in the environment, I've realized that it's actually very aligned with a lot of what we have seen with science, and
Hmm.
also they can support one another. It's also just like, what way do you want to feel? Sometimes it's not about what are the facts. Sometimes it's about, well, what do you want to believe? Because you could get the facts, but is that fact actually going to serve you in the best way possible? And maybe not. So, yeah, when I started to go to these kinds of events, and that first one, I had a similar experience where for me it was actually specific things that I saw. So, for example, this was a women's circle, and all these women started screaming when the host, Laura, was like, okay, we're just gonna like let everything out. And I was like, I'm not screaming in front of people. Like, they'll think I'm weird or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it didn't matter because my voice was drowned out by everyone else. And they just like
Mm.
screamed, they cried, they didn't care what anyone else thought. And they just were letting themselves feel emotions that I never thought I could be witnessed in feeling. It was like very healing for me, and also just opened my eyes up to like, wow, you can be around such a different group of people and within such a different environment.
You know
Yes.
what? Like when you realize that everything that you feel, other people feel,
Mm,
you you start giving yourself a bit more permission to just own the fact and not judge yourself for it. Like, we all come from the same place. We're just souls inside of whatever vessel that we're in, right? And all of this stuff of like worrying about what people think, and it's just fear. And that the people who would judge you for showing that are the ones who are afraid to show it themselves. It's a pure reflection of them. So for anyone who actually has a very hard time showing that, and the young me would have loved to hear this, is like, the people who would have rejected you at your like most vulnerable and who you really are the people who can't accept themselves as well. And they just might not be ready to be in your life. For some reason, we have it so one-sided in that everything is like, oh, I hope they can accept me and they can love me for who I am. But it's like, wait, why isn't it for a moment, can't you look at the other perspective, which is maybe they aren't ready to receive you at your fullest? Or if you take it a step further, which is maybe they haven't recognized that we're all the same. We're all from the same place. We're cut from the same piece of fabric of the universe, right? So everything that, my insecurities and my fears, guaranteed everyone has gone through their own version. So the people who are judging others for it, the only reason they're judging for it is because they haven't accepted that side of themselves. So there's no reason why we should be so desperate to chase the validation of these people when we can recognize that they haven't even hit a certain level of maturity if they're the ones judging you. And most of the time, they're not. There's going to be a good portion of people who actually just don't judge you. You almost just have to remind yourself that everyone goes through it, and we are all the same. And ultimately, there's going to be people out there who will love you for the traits that you have, and there's going to be some people who maybe just don't really resonate with you. They're not at the same frequency, and that's okay as well. But no matter what, you'll be able to find your tribe. You will.
Yeah, absolutely. So well put. I loved that. Thank you. Yeah, I think when you realize that even if you had the mask on, there will still be people that don't resonate with you or necessarily like you. And likewise, when you are being who you are authentically, there will still be some people that don't resonate with that. But if it's going to happen either way, then there's no point trying to get everyone on board with who you are, because it's literally never going to happen. And you also don't need the whole world to like you. There's so many people. If you have the people around you that matter and they love you, and like you say, they love you unconditionally, then do we really need more than that? Like, I don't think that we do.
I mean, look, it depends how deep you want to go in this conversation. Like, do we need, we don't need any of it, because if you really look at the big picture, which I know for some people they'll struggle to do so, but if you really look from a bird's eye view, we literally are all from the same place, right? So this whole thing of some people will love you and some won't, it's like it never mattered. It never mattered. Like, there's like levels within the levels, right? But in this world, yes, if you do look at the frequency chart and all of this, it's like you will attract people who resonate at the frequency that you're putting out, right? Regardless. So if you're putting out the frequency of that aligns with the mask that you're putting on, you'll get more people like that. If you put out the frequency of you at your call, you get more people like that. Either way, you will attract and you will repel. So it's really just your choice what you want to attract. And for some people, they want to attract things that don't actually align with them for other reasons. For example, for me, it was because I wanted validation from certain people in my life, right? So I put the mask on because I wanted validation to, let's say, get attention and status, to feel an insecurity of mine. So the only reason people really put the masks on is because of something inside that they haven't actually addressed. That's the most important thing, is to ask yourself, why are you doing these things that aren't in true alignment? And to be able to really just work through that, to then give yourself permission to just be who you are, and then attract the people that you want in your life from that place.
I'm curious to know, what is your thoughts or perspective on self-love? Because I feel like a lot of women talk about this as a topic, and I don't feel like I see men talking about this topic as much. Like I see men talking about redefining masculinity and that type of thing, which I think is awesome. And also sharing your vulnerabilities and how powerful that can be for you. But yeah, I'm curious to know what your experience is or what your thoughts are around self love.
My thoughts around self-love.
Mm.
Should we get more specific on it or?
Well, okay, to give you an example, like some people might think that loving yourself is kind of just accepting yourself no matter what, and that would mean that you become lazy and you don't do anything
Mm-mm.
because you just love yourself enough. The way I see it, and everyone's entitled to their perspective, I see it as if you love yourself, you want more for yourself. Like if you
Yeah.
come out of a place of love, then you're like, yeah, I deserve this amazing relationship. Yeah, I deserve this job. I'll still work for it. I still need to put in the work, but you actually allow yourself to have that. Whereas I think if you're coming from a place of I need to earn my own self love, then maybe that gets a little bit kind of tricky. Where if you're not doing certain things, you just, I don't know, treat yourself in unkind ways.
To be honest, the love has to come first, right? Like you can either be coming from two places. You can either be coming from fear or love. That's really all there is. So when you come from fear, it's like a contractive energy, right? So you're scared of losing things, and it's like a scarcity mindset, right? Or you come from love, which is more expansive. It's more abundant. That's when you're in your most creative state. There's no limitation. I mean, look, all I ask myself in my life is, am I coming from fear or love right now? Right? So if you truly are coming from a place of love, let's say self-love, that is like the most creative and expansive place. You're not setting limitations on yourself. You're coming from abundance, from like the highest version of yourself. That's when people say like, what does your higher self say? It's really just when you are operating at that highest frequency and version of yourself with no restriction, no limitation, and you truly believe anything is possible, what would you do from that place? That's what the whole self-love, stepping into your best version of yourself, I personally see it as, right? So self-love is not necessarily, giving yourself a treat. And like, my upbringing, my mom, for example, would always say to family members, they always struggled with weight. Like it was something I always saw growing up. Everyone was overweight, right? Oh, treat yourself. You've eaten healthy for a couple of days. Now go treat yourself with the junk food. I'm like, that makes zero sense. Treating yourself is giving your body the best possible thing to feel the way that you want to feel, right? Because the objective is to be operating from the most productive place that we can operate at. So yes, it's not necessarily like, oh, self-love, I'm going to be lazy and do nothing. It's like, no, self-love. Like, what would the version of me who's operating at their best capacity do right now? And most of the time, it's not being lazy and sitting on the couch and doing less than you could. If anything, it's doing as much as you know that you can. It's having a very strong vision that you set your mind to, and then just doing everything that it takes, everything that you can do in order to reach whatever that vision or whatever that goal is. Self-love is stepping into your fullest potential and not anything less.
Mm, yeah, I very much agree with that. Okay, interesting. Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing that perspective.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about your definition of success because, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I sometimes slip back into success is only status, fame, money, like these kinds of things. And
Mm.
I think that for sure those things are important. And actually, to bring them up again, in this podcast, Robin Sharma was talking about the 8 different types of wealth. And he talks about your health and your family and all these different things. And then money is just
Mm.
like one of them, which I really liked. But do you find like because you used to see success as the girls and the money and whatever else it was, does that sometimes do you check yourself and find yourself like, oh, I'm trying to chase this definition of success that actually isn't important to me anymore? Or is that something you've been able to kind of move through?
I feel like I've got great perspective now. And not that I never do, but I am so aware of where I come from that I rarely do in comparison to how I used to. And look, success varies for everyone. For me personally, I think ultimately, as long as I am acting and thinking in complete alignment to my values and what I know is right in my world, I'm happy, right? Because if I, let's say for a moment, my value system is my health, family, wealth, abundance, and just really being all that I know I can be and want to be. And then I have a clear understanding of what is required to get there. If I am not aligning my thoughts and my actions together, I'm unhappy, right? But if I know what is required to do those things and have those things and the kind of man that I need to be in order to have that reality, and I'm not acting in alignment, I'm unhappy. But as long as I am in alignment with the kind of person I know is required to have that reality, that's essentially what I personally deem as success. I can't remember who said it. Earl Nightingale. He said the closest definition of success that he has found is the pursuit or progression towards a worthy ideal. It's literally the sensation of progression towards something that you deem as worthy. That is the closest thing that he has found is the definition of success. So when I talk about that, I'm just very clear of the things that I know I should be doing for what my value systems are. And as long as I am acting in alignment, I'm on par. I'm not going to sleep at night thinking, damn it, I don't have this yet. I don't have that yet. I can literally sleep with peace because I know that I'm doing everything that I can be in this very moment, which is the only moment that exists. No other moment exists except for this one. So as long as I am in alignment in this moment, I'm happy. Like I know I'm on path, and that is it. And those accumulations of present moments, those snapshots over a period of time is what people look at as a timeline, past, present, and future. But in reality, it was just a series of present moments. And all I aim to do is just be in alignment in as many moments as possible that will create the timeline of what society deems as success. But it's going to look different for everyone.
Mm-hmm. What about in terms of, sounds like you've got this great perspective on life now that you've been able to develop through, well, personal development, and it started off with that day at the church or before that with the gym,
It was
but
a
it's
big moment.
progressed from there.
Yeah.
Big moment.
Yep.
So for anyone that's listening to this, what would you say is some of the particular things that you went and added to your daily life? For example, a habit or a routine, ritual, whatever you want to call it. What are some of the particular things that you did that helped you to become, as you said, feel at peace with your life and where you are now, and to be able to step out of looking at success as one way and redefine it for yourself?
A daily routine?
Yeah, any kind of thing that, like, for example, for me, meditation and journaling were huge in terms of helping me to build up my self-confidence and self-worth, because I would see the thoughts that I was having about myself reflected back either through the thoughts in my mind and actually observing those through meditation, or in journaling I would write down the ways that I would feel, and that helped me to actually understand more about myself. So yeah, I'm wondering if there was particular things that you did, maybe with Craig or whatever, that helped you in terms of progressing to where you are now.
I would say it always changes.
Mhm.
There's not like one thing that's always, stuck with me. It does change based on where I'm at with life. But there's a couple things. I have noticed that for myself, if I don't have a block of time where there's no distractions and I can just sit in that creativity, I feel incredibly uneasy. I personally just like to know, especially more in that morning time frame, that my day is not getting dictated by others, because I love to just make sure I tap into my creativity somewhere throughout the day. And for me, that's the morning. But that's super important for me because that is the time where I'm moving the needle forward with my business, with everything. It's the time where I can think long term. It's the time where I can create content in a way that, you know, I'm really putting conscious thought behind it. So that's one thing. I always like to have a dedicated open block where it's like I'm not replying to messages if I don't want to. I'm not going to answer the phone call. I'm not going to feel obligated to do this or that. That is the time where it's my own playbook and it will change whenever I want. You know, I'll do whatever I want in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's been always important for me, especially for creatives. They need that. Yeah. So that's one aspect. I haven't done this every day of my life, but I do find that if I can just map out a general idea of the main things I want to accomplish the next day, the night before, that does help just kind of decipher things. So basically, most moments of my day, I'm just constantly deciphering what is the next most important thing to do. I'm constantly prioritizing the order of activities simply because of the fact that there's always going to be 1,000 things to do. But the reason why there's some people in life who get further ahead at the same time is they're prioritizing the actions that have higher leverage. And that was something that I really had to learn in my later years of running business and that I constantly practice now. It is just like, okay, what are the next priorities? And then just having that dedicated space somewhere within the day to really just like, you know, have caffeine and just put in my earphones and just get to it. That's always been my foundation. And then the last thing, honestly, and it's not every day, but fitness has been an absolute staple for me. Like I cannot imagine life without hitting the gym. And I don't do it every day, but it's incredibly important for me just to tend to that physical side because it like literally opens me up physically, you know? Like when you put your body through something, like you're just so much more expansive and open. And I used to always say when you deadlift heavy ass weight or you squat heavy ass weight, there's no way you can go to a meeting and be nervous or whatever. It's like you just did like the most primal thing that we're designed to do. And it just puts everything else in perspective because you already created a sense of accomplishment in your day. So those are some very important staples that I keep in my life to make sure that I'm constantly reevaluating what my next actions are.
Love all of those, and especially the reprioritizing. I used to try and plan out my whole day. I still am kind of trying to do this, but I've realized that it doesn't always work the way that like things come up. So I think having a plan is great, yes, and thinking about maybe what's the one thing. I don't know if you've read the book The One Thing, but that was
Yeah.
quite a good read. And yeah, what's the one most important thing that, as you said, brings you most leverage towards your goals? But then also the ability to actually maybe come back to in the moment, reprioritizing as you go. And I've started to think about, okay, just what's my next step? Because I find that in my life, you know, I've got my full-time job and then I've also got this podcast and then my health and fitness and social aspects and family aspects. And so sometimes it feels like a lot. And if I think about every step in the day, I just get completely overwhelmed. Whereas if I think about, okay, well, what's maybe the one thing or two things that I really need to do today that are going to move me forward? And then as I go, I can just take the next step and not have to think about, okay, what's after that and then after that. You know, have that zoom out maybe the day before and have a look at your day, but then actually give yourself that ability to just kind of go with the flow a little bit. I think structure is really good, but to be creative as well, you need that kind of structure and then within that, the time that you can just flow and the time that you don't
Yeah.
have those distractions as well.
Yeah, having that balance of both is really important. And I was just writing an email out to my newsletter today, literally on the exact same thing. Is every single day, like obviously I do have my priorities. I know what's like the most important things, but I have that blocked out space where I don't necessarily restrict myself in any order. I go towards what I feel I can give the best attention to, and then I just domino effect it. Exactly like you said. I used to be a lot more like, oh, what are all the next things and the next things? But then the quality of my current task would diminish because I wasn't really allowing myself to enter flow state. And that flow state is obviously when, as an example, you lose perception of time, right? You're just so engrossed in the task that you just can't like unglue yourself from it. And my aim throughout the day is to keep myself in flow state as much as possible, because that is when we are operating like in our magic, right? So when you're in your head and trying to do a task and then think about, you're not in flow, you're not in that place where you're really just like giving it the quality that you know you can. So yes, having the priorities, but then allowing a little bit of looseness to get into that flow and then carry on just one task after another. And not only do you get better quality within the task that you do, but you'll find that you'll be able to pump out way more because you've minimized the excess thought process that would have just made the whole thing longer.
In terms of balance and balancing everything that you do, as we spoke a little bit about all the different things that you do in terms of your business. So you have an online business for fitness
Yeah.
coaching, and then you also have your inner circle, which I'd love to hear more about what that looks like and what that entails. And then friends, fitness, like all these different things. How do you manage all of that?
I kind of just give a time towards everything. So first of all, from that work point of view, that is, I like to keep work, the sooner that I do it, the better, right? Like those creative spaces for me, more in that first half of the day. So that's really when I'm getting like the very brain taxing work done that requires like full presence from me. Then typically as, let's say, health, either if it's like a proper training day, I'll do that first thing, then work. If it's a bit more of like a active recovery day, I just want to get moving, I'll do that after that first creative block of work, just to give myself a break, but keep things moving, right? So I just get straight into the body. So that, like from a work point of view, I will say there are times where, it's all balanced, but then there's times where I have to let, let's say, my partner know, for example, and say, look, I'm gonna have to just really be in the zone for the next couple of days. Like I set expectation, right?
Mm.
I think it's an illusion that everything is going to always be 100% balanced. I look at it a bit more at a macro scale, which is like, okay, there will be times where I probably won't be very available within this time frame, but then I can give more here. And ultimately for me, I mean, a lot of my friends have a similar mindset and lifestyle. So a lot of them are all in business as well, and they're very much the same. So our form of catching up can literally just be talking about business, right? And to be honest with you, we don't even have to spend that much time together to feel good in that bucket, right? We can exchange a couple messages, quick phone call. We keep it real quick, or we have dinner later in the day, and that's usually what would end up happening. Is like a group of the boys would all like have a dinner, and that will be our time to like catch up. But I am blessed enough to have my life set up in a way, and I think this is actually the most important thing, is that my life is set up in a way to where I am naturally ticking these boxes without trying very hard. So I'll explain, right? Like my gym's very close. That's always been a non-negotiable. I block out my time to work. I live with a couple of friends of mine who are in the business space as well. So I've technically always got that accessible and available to me. And all my friends are quite close around me as well. Like like for people who are like, oh, well, I don't have friends. It's like, well, be the kind of person who people want to be friends with, right? And they'll welcome you, right? And if you're valuable enough to them as well, they'll welcome you to, for example, meet up with them later at a time that works for you or whatever it is, right? Like you also have to be valuable to be able to have that available too, right? In a way that you want it to be available. So like, for example, that for me is like a tick in the friend bucket. Like it's already around me as well. With my partner, she's got similar values in some ways, and that's important, right? Like I said, the whole setup is in alignment because the people who I'm around anyways have similar values to me and do similar things. So I can work with my partner just working next to me. And yes, it's not quality time, but then we can meet up, like we can obviously dedicate proper time together later on after we've both done the work. So really that has been how I've always done it, is I integrate everything. I don't want separateness. I mean, look, there's times I do have to separate myself, but I try to integrate as much as possible to
Mm-hmm.
minimize the friction. I try to keep everything close. I hang around people who have similar values, so we usually end up doing the same things. And I just tick all buckets like that. As long as I have my time by myself to get my creative work done, it's very easy for me to access the rest because I've set
Mm-hmm.
everything up that way. So I think for the person listening, it's like, all right, well, what are the things that you value most, and how can you set up your life in a way where by naturally doing one, you're doing the other?
Yeah. Work-life harmony is something that I like to talk about rather than work-life balance because I guess, I don't know, for me, if I think of balance, it's like one thing goes up, one thing
Mm,
goes down. But these days, and especially if you have an online business or you're working for yourself, you have your own business, then everything is together. And what you
yes.
value in terms of how you do business is probably similar to what you value in terms of how you spend time with friends. So, yeah, I actually think that's a really good, like, it's kind of like the best hack you could have is actually just align the people that you spend time with in terms of your friends and also the kinds of hobbies that you do and where possible the work that you do as well. If you can
Yes. Yes.
bring in that overlap rather than thinking that you need to try and separate them into little boxes to make it fit, maybe you actually need to integrate them more instead, which I think could
Uh,
be quite
I
helpful.
always say I love the saying "life by design." It truly is, you know, and I understand because I've been met back with some people who say, "Well, you don't get it. Like I've got a family and bills to pay." I'm like, "Man, you created that situation,
It's
so
true.
don't come complaining to me. If you created
Mm,
it, then you can create another one,
mm-hmm.
right?" "Oh, well, I don't have time." I'm like, "Get less sleep then." Like, and I'm not recommending to get less sleep, but what I mean is that you are in control of that. It's life by your own design. You designed the one that you're complaining about. Get yourself out of it. Everything was intentional. Me having an online business that is surrounded by my passion, which is helping others get in shape, develop their mindset, basically transform themselves, overcome their limiting fears, is because it's everything that I did, right? So when I do it and when I teach it, I'm not like, oh, this sucks. Let me just get this out of the way. I'm like, no, man, I'm like, I am reiterating the things that I had to learn. And the best part is because it's so integrated, as I continue to further develop myself, it pours into the business because I teach it to people who I work with. So it all pours into each other's buckets. It's like the
Mm,
setup is designed to leverage everything so that when I pour into one, others are getting filled at the same time. Isn't that cool?
very cool. I
Right?
love it.
and
Yeah.
and the thing is like being very intentional with the setup, because most people are not intentional. They do things just because they put societal pressures on them, and then they complain about it. It's your fault. You did that. Now get yourself out of it. But it starts with being able to recognize that it is in your control. Like you are the creator. That is why I wear this this little bracelet that says creative. It's just a reminder that it's like, you know what? I truly can. And I truly do believe that I am responsible for that, for how my life looks, and I can create whatever I want to create in this world.
Mm, mm. I think it's worth mentioning for people that maybe at first, if you realize that your life doesn't look like that right now and you would want it to be, because you would have to want it as well to change it in that way. But I think it's worth recognizing that at first maybe things will feel less productive. But when you
Yeah.
start to change the people you're spending time around, when you start to change the work that you do, if you decide you want to look for different work, if you decide you want to do different hobbies or decide you want to start going to the gym or start going to markets to get healthier food or whatever it is, like when you first make those changes, things will feel less productive because it's going to take time to make those switches. And also you may have that resistance because it's hard to make those changes sometimes at first because of the fear, and it's also really worth it. Like, I guess you just have to decide whether it's worth it to you. Only you can actually decide that. No one else can tell you to change and you'll go and do it because we don't work like that as humans. We need to want the change for ourselves. Sometimes I've had people in my life where they've had certain illnesses and things like this that are by choice, but they have got a mental condition, or there's something that is going on for them. And also, they can choose to continue to stay unwell. They actually have to want to change for themselves. You can only support someone, you can't force them into it, which as a coach is a really valuable thing to be able to learn as well.
In life, wherever you are and the goal that you've set, there's always going to be obstacles you come across. And every single one, and they're not going to stop coming, you have the opportunity to let it break you down, or to actually break through it. And everything that you want is on the other side of that fear. I truly believe that. As an example, I have a piano background. So around year 7, I picked up piano. Again, my reason back then is I wanted attention, right? So anything I could do. So I was learning it. I was like practicing it on like the apps and everything because I didn't have one. But eventually I got pretty good, and I ended up going to a music school, and I was getting like music lessons and everything. But I was still like really shy, had no idea what to do. And there was a music concert, like a competition that they were hosting. And of course, I was never considering it. Like the thought of being on stage in front of people, like literally thinking about it, I would feel my heart rate, like just beating, just the thought. And I remember I was with my mom at the time, and she's like, he wants to do it. And I was like, are you serious? Like, no, like I don't want to. And then like I had my piano teacher there, and he's like, yeah, like we can do it. There was like 80 applicants, like 80 performances. And like I was so nervous. I was just like part of me knew I should do it. It was even just the discussion of it. I was like experiencing massive anxiety. I just remember I was like, oh no, like I literally don't, like I'm so uncomfortable. But they put my name in there, to perform. And there were 80 acts. The audience was a couple hundred people.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah. And I remember I was like, all my family was there visiting, and my dad came. Like it was just like this. I was like, oh my God, like this is so nerve-wracking. And I remember I was behind the stage before they're about to call my name up, and I'm just like shaking. I'm just there shaking. I'm like, oh, like this is it. I'm gonna humiliate myself. They call my name out. It's dead quiet. There's hundreds of people just waiting for you to do your act. So I go and I sit on the piano and I start playing, and I'm shaking at the keys, and I'm playing it, and I like, you're your own biggest critic, and I could hear mistakes I was making. I'm like, oh, I fucked it up. Like, like it's done. This is so bad. And I'm kind of playing it, and I'm screwing up. And like I finished it, everyone clapped, and I'm just standing there like, oh man, I just felt bad. I was just judging myself in every way. And I remember I sat back down and like wanted to just hide. I sat back down with my family, and everyone did all the 80 acts. And they're calling out all the people who were like, third place, second place. And on the first place, they were like, first place, William Gill. And I'm like, wait, are you kidding me? And everyone's like, whoa. My family's like, yeah, like go up, go up. And I'm just like this, I'm like, I won? This is like the first time I've ever won anything in my life. At this point, I've like never won anything. I was always just like being the last to be picked in sports. It was my first ever reference of becoming like first in anything. And I remember like I went on stage, they gave me the certificate, and everyone's cheering, and I was just up there like, holy shit. It was such a proud moment. And I'm like, I never would have thought, or I could have experienced this if I had never said yes, if I had never did the thing that I was scared of the most. The life that you're looking for is on the other side of that fear. And every time you're confronted with it, you have a decision to let it break you down, or to allow yourself to break through it. And until you look at those obstacles and the fears that you have like signposts for you to walk down that path, you're going to be living a very, very miserable life full of what ifs. It's as simple as that.
Wow, thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed hearing that story. And yeah, imagine like if you had not done that, and then how long until maybe you would have realized what's on the other side. Like, I think
Hmm.
it probably only takes one time for that to happen where you then go, holy shit, like,
Yes.
look at what you can
Yes.
do when you just step past, or as you like to say, break through that fear. I actually have a poster in my room from an event that I ran like a month ago, wasn't that long ago, a month and a half ago. And I was really scared to run this event because I was going to be doing something that I'd basically just made up. And I
Hmm.
was going to be putting myself out there, and I was going to be posting about on social media every day and blasting it in people's faces and have to just go, that's what it takes to get people to come, because people actually don't see your stuff as much as you think that they do. And that was
Hmm.
a good
Yeah.
lesson out of that. But yeah, in the end, I had the Diary of a CEO host, Stephen Bartlett, attend my event, which
What? Get
was, yeah,
out.
insane. Like, he showed up. So I
Wow.
created this community meetup for the Diary of a CEO fans that would happen before his tour, his speaking tour.
Ah.
And because I thought, well, there's going to be all these like minded people together going to this speaking
Wow.
tour, but you don't get to talk to one another because you're at his talking event. So I thought, why don't we all get together beforehand? And if I'm completely honest, I
You
actually,
kind of knew. You kind of knew.
well,
You.
no, I really didn't think that he would show. Maybe some of his team, because I thought, look, this is so in their best interest. Like, I'm getting all these people together because we all love the Diary of a CEO.
Mm.
And being honest, it did start out with me wanting to meet Stephen Bartlett. And then after that, it progressed to, oh, I just want to facilitate this awesome night for like minded people to get together. But yeah, never in a million years did I think that he would show up. And like, to me, that just was such hard evidence to go, okay, Georgie, when you decide to ignore all those fears in your mind and the what ifs about what will people say, what will people think, and just go for what you feel called to do, then literally insane things can happen that would have never happened if you didn't just keep on taking those steps to get there. So yeah, I love that, and I think that's such a nice thing to kind of remember every day. Like, have the poster in your room, have the, I don't know if you have the award you won from from your
I
piano
think it's somewhere. I think it's
competition.
somewhere.
Yeah, put that back up somewhere. I'm sure you've
That's
got
a
plenty of
that's a
other
good point.
things
I
since
should I
there,
should
but
go look for it. Yeah,
yeah,
I
you
should
should.
go look for it.
Hmm.
Hey, but that's an awesome story, and I truly believe like if you can see it in your mind, you can make it happen. Like
Hmm.
it starts with seeing it, and the rest is just your ability to go experience it. There's a book that I'm reading now, Conversations with God. I truly think I'm reading this, and I'm like everyone, this is like required reading. But the like something that it mentions is like the whole point of us being here is to be able to have the thought of, let's say, a life that we want and being able to experience it and then realize the power that we have to remember. And that's a key word, remember. It was always there. But what we're here to do is remember what we're capable of. And it starts with the thought, it starts with that vision of you meeting Stephen,
Hmm.
right?
Of
You
you winning the
you had
piano competition.
yeah, I mean, look, I didn't know if I was going to win that, but like, let's say for a
Yeah.
moment, like a big one for me, I always knew that I was going to go speak on stages. I always had the vision, you know? So like everything that I was doing was like developing myself. I had to become the man that I saw on that stage, right? So when I have that vision, all the fears and everything, like my mindset is like, okay, cool. I'm just going to keep bulldozing through until I get that because I know I can. And the
Mm.
only reason that I couldn't is if I said I couldn't. And if I listened to the opinions of others who said I couldn't and believed it to be my own. The
Yeah.
only person getting in the way of that vision that you have is truly yourself, no one else. But if you can see it, you can achieve it. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's absolutely true.
Well, the cheesy things are cheesy because they are true, I feel.
Yes, yes. You know, as an example, you are an average of the people you hang around. It's absolutely true. So the biggest thing for me is like be very clear on what you want, but also recognize that there is no reason that you cannot. We are all from the same piece of fabric. So why can't you? And it might be a different route than you expect that is required to get there. And that's the thing, is that most people compare to other people. Oh, well, they did this and they did that, but they're not you, which means they have their own strengths and their own weaknesses that has paved their own path to get there. So have the vision, set the steps, but don't be so married to the way to get there, because the path may change.
Yeah.
As long as you are crystal clear on exactly where you want to go, and you're very clear with what's motivating you to get there, and it's aligned with who you are and what your values are that you live by, you will get there. You will be convicted on that belief, because remember, you attract what energy you put out. And if you align with the person who has that reality, you will bring it in, as long as you are acting in accordance, in alignment of who that person is. And the only reason you wouldn't is if you didn't believe you were that person. It all starts with you.
I'm feeling very motivated right now, Will. I need to jump off this and just like start getting into my creative mode. Oh, that's
I'm
so
serious,
great.
man. Yeah.
I can
It's
tell. I can
yeah.
tell. And you're so right in what you're saying, and you say it so well, which I think really helps for people to understand it, because sometimes these kinds of ideas can be quite abstract and said in a way that's
Yes.
not actually applicable to our lives. So I really
Yes.
appreciate that the way that you share that information is bite-sized, and it's something that everyone could really implement in their own life. And as we start to wrap up, Will, I'd love to ask you, what are you looking forward to in your life, whether that's in your businesses or whatever that comes to mind that you would love to share in terms of what's coming up for you that you're excited about?
You mentioned the inner circle. That's something I'm pretty excited about right now.
Mhm.
So there's basically like one main direction I'm going. Like I obviously have my fitness service that will always be there. It's a staple. It's a foundation in my world of people. They should pay attention to their health. So that will always be there. Okay. But this inner circle is essentially everything that we're just speaking about now, like helping people live the life that they want to live, not the life that I want for them, the life that they want for themselves, but being able to help them get out of their own way in order to achieve that. That's what that is about. And that's where I'm going to be meeting up with the weekly Q&As, calls, and all of this, just to make sure that we are setting those goals and that they are acting in alignment and being challenged accordingly to be able to do it. Because it's very easy to not challenge yourself the same way that someone who has done those steps and has worked through what you've worked through will challenge you to do, and also instill the belief within you that you also can. So I'm excited about that, because that is exactly what my life's work has been,
Mm-hmm.
right? Fitness was one side, but ultimately everything I do is to become my version of the ultimate man for myself. And that's exactly what I want to do for other people, which is help them, male or female, become the best version of themselves. So that's what that is. And there's video content and all of this stuff that I pour into it from that personal development, health, and mindset point of view as well. That is what now I'm starting. Okay. And that's the main thing I'm excited about. And also being able to spread the message to as many people as possible, which is why I'm also going down the route of more public speaking, jumping on stages, talking the message, social media as well, more YouTube. It's like, now it's time. It's time to really just help empower other people from all the stuff that I had gone through and the perspective that I have, that I had to adopt to become who I am now, to be able to help other people realize the same within themselves and be that helping hand and encouragement, and that person who can instill the belief in them that I had to also get from other people as well, to start believing in myself. That's essentially what the cause is now.
Where can people find you, Will, if they have heard this and they're like, oh, damn, I need to be in that inner circle?
So yeah, my website is basically www.fitbosssystem.com. So it's the boss and system is 3 S's in a row, just so people don't mess that up. So fitbosssystem.com. Okay, that's the website. It'll have all the coaching services there, fitness wise, inner circle wise. And I'm on Instagram, of course, at william.gill, Gill. That's my Instagram. And there you'll just be able to essentially just keep in touch with me, and feel free to message me if you have questions, whatever it is. I am on YouTube a bit more now, but you can probably just start with the first two and then work
Mhm.
from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, thank you, Will. This has been really wonderful, and I've really enjoyed how you've been able to share your journey and a lot of the lessons that you have gained along the way, like really
Mm.
valuable lessons that I think a lot of people would need to hear and would really benefit from hearing, and stuff that I
Well,
just
just
love to talk about as well. So,
yeah, one comment on that as well
yeah,
on the website, because I have a newsletter. Okay, it depends if if you want to focus more on like health and weight loss, there's a health newsletter. But if you want the actual mindset and personal development stuff that we're talking about here, I've got like a 30-day challenge newsletter. So every single day, I'm actually giving like a whole paradigm shift. So basically, the way that you view something, right? The way that you see the world will help you take the next step because it'll change your belief, right? So every single day, I'm laying out those lessons that I had to learn over those 30 days. So that's free. Anyone can sign up to it. If you just go on the website and register for the self-improvement or weight loss based on what you want, you can be put into those newsletters and get that value too.
awesome. Yeah, as I said, really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed your background there too, of just like nature. It's been nice to just
Yeah, it's
have that in the background.
yeah,
Beautiful. And
really
I
nice
hope
place.
you enjoyed this conversation as well.
Yeah, it was great and great to connect with you as well. Love what you're doing, spreading a good message. And I think you're also a prime example of what we're talking about, like what you said with your when you hosted that event. So I think you're going to do a lot more great things.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.